Hello everyone and welcome back to Cruel and Unusual Storytime. I am your host, Simon Dexter. And can I just say, it is so good to be back. I'm all hooked up on my computer, I've got this fancy new microphone to make me sound super sexy. And we are ready to go. First off, I want to thank everyone for being so patient with me, and just to show I'm super sorry for the delay, we're going to read something I swore I wouldn't read again. A lost episode of Creepypasta. Yay. Now before we truly dive into this lusciousness that is this piece of trash, I do want to extend that I do not hate all lost episode creepypastas. Just like I don't hate all gaming creepypastas. I feel every genre that the online community has tinkered with has a reason to exist. But they just garner the most stupid stories. Speaking of which, here's our first story in a long time. Dead Bart. You know how Fox has a weird way of counting Simpsons episodes? Well, no, not really, but thanks for alienating part of the audience now. They refuse to count a couple of them, making the amount of episodes inconsistent. The reason for this is a lost episode from Season 1. Ooh. Finding details about this missing episode is difficult. No one who was working on the show at the time likes to talk about it. For what has been pieced together, the lost episode was written entirely by Matt Groening. I really hope I am pronouncing that right, please forgive me. During production of the first season, Matt started to act strangely. He was very quiet, seemed nervous, and morbid. Of course he seemed morbid. This is a fucking lost episode creepypasta. What did I expect? Mentioning this to anyone who is present results in them getting very angry and forbidding you to ever mention it to Matt. Well, that just seems rude. I first heard of it in an event where David Silverman was speaking. Someone in the crowd asked about the episode, and Silverman simply left the stage, ending the presentation hours early. I've actually heard that this was true, but I've also heard many things that were supposedly true, so I'm not going to really count my chickens before they hatch. The episode's production number was 7G06. The title was Dead Bart, because what else would it be called? Would it be called Happy Fun Times? No. No lost episode is ever pleasant. The episode labeled 7G06 Moaning Lisa was made later and given Dead Bart's production code to hide the latter's existence. Because that's just the way it works, I guess. In addition to getting angry, asking anyone who is on the show about this will cause them to do everything they can to stop you from directly communicating with Matt Groening. At a fan event, I managed to follow him after he spoke to the crowd and eventually had a chance to talk to him alone. But what was the point of that last sentence then, if everyone's going to have... You know what? Never mind. I can already tell this is already just going to be one of those stories. As he was leaving the building, he didn't seem upset that I had followed him. Probably expected a typical encounter with an obsessive fan. And I mentioned the last episode, though. All color drained from his face, and he started trembling. Because, you know, when I create something I'm not proud of, that's exactly how I react, too. When I asked him if he could tell me any details, he sounded like he was on the verge of tears. He grabbed a piece of paper, wrote something on it, and handed it to me. He begged me never to mention the episode again. The piece of paper had a website address on it. I would rather not say what it was for reasons you'll see in a second. Okay, so... whatever. I entered the address into my browser and I came across a site that was completely black except for a line of yellow text. A download link. Because yeah, if I was going to hide something I didn't want anyone to see, I would put it on the internet. I clicked on it and a file started downloading. Once the file downloaded, my computer went crazy. Really? I'm not even going to bother. Okay. It was the worst virus I had ever seen. System restore didn't work. The entire computer had to be rebooted. Before doing this, though, I copied the file onto a CD. I tried to open up my now empty computer, and as I suspected, there was an episode of The Simpsons on it. Dear God, that whole thing just made my mouth turn to mush. Welcome back, everyone. The episode started off like any other episode, until everything went fucking wrong! Oh, is that not the Lex line? I'm sorry. It had very poor quality animation. I learned not to knock this, because this one wasn't even meant to be shown, unlike the one that actually made it onto TV magically. Looking at you, Ed, Ed, and Eddie. You know I am. If you've seen the original animation for Some Enchanted Evening, it was similar, but less stable. The first act was fairly normal, but the way the characters acted was a little off. And we get into this can of worms. Homer seemed angrier. Marge seemed depressed for no reason whatsoever. Sorry, that part wasn't him. I was ad-libbing a bit. Lisa seemed anxious. Bart seemed to have genuine anger and hatred for his parents, because, that's normal in a linear TV show that has regular episodes. I'm loving moving in on the microphone, by the way, if you guys can't tell. Sorry for being right in your ear. The episode was about the Simpsons going on a plane trip. Near the end of the first act, the plane was taking off. Bart was fooling around, as you'd expect. However, as the plane was about 50 feet off of the ground, Bart broke a window on the plane and was sucked out. Okay, I like where this is going. At the beginning of the series, Matt had an idea that was the animated style of the Simpsons world represented life, and that death turned things more realistic. This was used in this episode. The picture of Bart's corpse was barely recognizable. I took full advantage of it, not having to move, and made an almost photorealistic drawing of his dead body. Can we have some smarty pants time now? So I'm going to talk a little artistic hierarchy for a moment here. There are some things I feel personally, so yes, this is biased, but I'm sure a lot of people would agree with me here, but there are some things I feel you need to have to be a good artist. Of any kind. I don't care if you're a writer, a cartoonist, whatever the hell you are, you need to have certain things to be a good artist. You see this right here? This is called artistic integrity. It is the most important thing you could ever have as an artist. You should always create what you want to create in the best way you can create it. Now, before you ask why I'm getting so pissy, as that's what it seems he wants to convey here, there's a big law of art that needs to be adhered to just after artistic integrity. And that, my dear audience, is perspective. You need to know what you are making, and why you are making it, and who it is for. If you're making an animated sitcom meant for mature audiences, then tell me why you would even incorporate death as not only so grimly serious, but have it be a prominent feature in your animated sitcom. Now, there is some death in comedies that are pulled off beautifully. Take Matt's other show, for example, Futurama. There are a few episodes in which Fry laments over the loss of his past relationships that all died out 1,000 years ago. But there's a big difference. In that, the show is about a guy who goes to the future and leaves everything behind. That's actually part of the story in a way. In The Simpsons, though? The fucking goofy-ass slapstick pop culture referencing Simpsons? You want to make death an important feature in The Simpsons, and make it in such a way that the artists from Ren and Stimpy wouldn't touch it? I know it was their first season, and they were being experimental and all, but that's where the perspective comes in. You know you're writing a comedy. Why even touch the idea of something so macabre and morbid for something so out of place? The idea is cool, Mr. Writer, if it wasn't the fucking Simpsons. Now, if Matt really did want to incorporate this as an actual element, let me break it down for you. He was extremely high or drunk, he was young and naive, or he was being sarcastic knowing that's a stupid idea. I'm not downing on artistic ideas, but to be a good artist, well, a successful artist in the media anyway, you have to be able to think somewhat realistically and have perspective on what it is you are creating. Now, to those I pissed off with that, just keep in mind I'm not saying you can't have weird things in a show. Just if you know you're writing something that's going to be meant for kids, don't put violence, vulgarity, and sex into it. If you're going to write a comedy in general, don't put anything that's dark and depressing into it unless it works with the story. Note, with the story. I'm not saying you can't have death in a story, but if the thing doesn't even kind of revolve around it, like I said in Futurama, Fry did technically lose everyone because they all died, so that's part of the story. That works. Where in The Simpsons, I don't know. Just keep in mind on the whole perspective thing, okay? Okay, where were we? Act 1 ended with the shot of Bart's corpse. When Act 2 started, Homer, Marge, and Lisa were sitting at their tables crying. The crying went on and on. It got more pained and sounded more realistic. Better acting than you would think possible. Well, just rude to the actors, buddy. The animation started to decay even more as they cried. Why does it always have to get worse when something gets worse? Can't it just say the same bad that it already was? Because that makes sense, at least. And you could hear murmuring in the background. Well, just a bad recording then. Worse than mine. The characters could barely be made out. They were stretching and blurring. They looked deformed and shadows with looked like deformed shadows with random bright colors thrown on them, sorry. There were faces looking in the window, flashing in and out, so you were never sure what they looked like, 'cause that makes sense in the Simpsons universe. This crying went on for all of Act 2. That's worse than the door in Ed, Edd n Eddy, what the fuck? Act 3 opened up with a title card saying 1 year had passed. Homer, Marge, and Lisa were skeletally thin, and still sitting at the table. There was no sign of Maggie or the pets. Guess we're to assume they died. Lovely. They decided to visit Bart's grave. Springfield was completely deserted, because that makes sense. As they walked to the cemetery, the houses became more and more decrepit, because that makes sense. They all looked abandoned. When they got to Bart's grave, Bart's body was just lying in front of his tombstone, looking like it did at the end of Act 1, because that makes sense. The family started crying again. Eventually they stopped and just stared at Bart's body. The camera zoomed in on Homer's face. According to summaries, Homer tells a joke at this part, but it isn't audible in the version I saw. You can't tell what Homer is saying. What, too lazy to think of an inappropriate joke at a time like this, Mr. Writer? The view zoomed out as the episode came to a close. The tombstones in the background had the names of every Simpsons guest star on them. Some that no one had heard of in 1989. Some that haven't been on the show yet. All of them had death dates on them. Let's just finish this, shall we? For guests who died since, like Michael Jackson and George Harrison, the dates were when they would die. The credits were completely silent and seemed handwritten. The final images was the Simpsons family on their couch like in the intros, but all drawn, in hyper-realistic, lifeless style of Bart's corpse. Hate that phrase, hyper-realistic. I hate it. For guests who died since... A thought occurred to me after seeing the episode for the first time. You could try to use the tombstones to predict the death of living Simpsons guest stars, but there's something odd about most of them, the ones who haven't died yet. All the deaths are listed as the same date. Ooh. And that, everyone, was Dead Bart. A rather shorter one, but hey, I'm not complaining. If the story has any strong points, it did get right to the point, didn't it? So, what was wrong with this? Other than the fact it's just another bad lost episode creepypasta, let's start with some specifics. First off, I respect Matt Groening a great deal. I think he's a very creative individual who brought the world some of its best shows. And with that in mind, I don't think Matt would ever approve of something so ridiculous as this story, let alone write it himself. Seriously, what is it with lost episodes and literally not being about anything? Did anything even happen in that episode? Simpsons acting weird. Go on plane. Bart dies. Everyone cries. The end. There was no build-up to the death. There was no reason for the death. You really expect anyone to believe that the creator of this show would kill such a major character in the series that early in production? What's even the point? Why create a character and make him seem important only to kill him so quickly? That works great in dramas, but not in comedy, which this is supposed to be. Another thing is that just really turns me off is Matt's reaction to the episode. Now, I'm not proud of everything I've ever created in my life. I straight up don't like talking about certain things in my past. But I've never gotten pale or shivered from something like that. But Simon, it's such a dark episode from a dark time. Maybe it was a goddamn cartoon. No one died. He didn't kill anyone. Sure, the imagery would have been upsetting, maybe, but it was his fucking idea. If he had just saw it from someone else, yeah, I can see that weirding him out a little bit. And I'm no doctor, but shame does not cause those symptoms. Everything else that bothered me, I covered in my perspective rant. No one in their right minds would change the formula for their series partway through the first season. Unless they don't want a show anymore. It just doesn't make sense, and conspiracy theorists, I know you're listening. Say what you want. Maybe Matt was in his emo phase and wanted to incorporate death as a thing in a cartoon written for comedy, whatever. The fact is, if you still believe this, I'm not going to be able to change your mind. I don't have to. That's not the show's job. Its job is to entertain as I suffer and educate those who are still salvageable. Just keep in mind, you can't change my mind either. All in all, I do believe Dead Bart has earned its place in storytelling infamy. Thank you all for joining me in this cruel and unusual story time. And for those of you just joining, welcome aboard. I hope I didn't ruin our relationship forever with this, but if I did, I'm truly sorry and hope you find someone who does agree with your point of view, if it can't be me. I want to give another big thank you to everyone for being so patient with me in my forced hiatus, and I hope to let out more content really soon. If you have any suggestions for a bad creepypasta I should read, send them my way and I'll have them checked to see if they'll really make me rage. Remember, they don't have to be bad for everyone. If you sincerely think they're a bad story, and you think it's just you, who knows? Maybe I'll agree, and then you could tell everyone, "Ha! I told you, it was shit." Remember, the worse they are for me, the better it'll be for you. I'll see you all real soon.